Hi, everybody. A lot of my friends know that I'm a scientist and they've asked me a lot of questions about the virus that causes COVID-19. And so rather than reply with long emails, I've decided to put this together into a sort of a presentation that will hopefully make it all obvious to everyone. The first thing to remember, though, is that COVID-19 is caused by a virus, and viruses are very different from bacteria, and this seems to confuse a lot of people. Bacteria are things that you'd normally call germs or bugs or microbes, and they look very different from viruses, and in fact, they're functionally very different from viruses as well. Importantly, bacteria are alive, and that means they can replicate by themselves and grow and divide and turn into more bacteria, whereas viruses are not alive, and they can only work when they're inside another cell that can help them in their process of dividing. Another thing that confuses a lot of people is antibiotics and whether they can kill viruses. And the antibiotics are drugs that have been developed to specifically block some of those processes inside the bacteria. And since viruses are so different from bacteria, these antibiotics just aren't going to work on the viruses. They're only going to work on the bacteria. So let's look now at how these viruses work and how they cause trouble for our cells. These viruses are normally floating around outside the cell, but they need to get into our human cells to have any dangerous effects. Our cells, though, are protected by a plasma membrane, a membrane around the outside of the cells, and the viruses normally can't get across this membrane because they're too big. And this is very good for our cells and protects us from damage by the viruses. In fact, under normal conditions, a lot of viruses are locked out of our cells, and that's really good for protecting our cells. However, there is an Achilles heel, and that is that our cells have to have some outward-facing proteins that have very special functions that are really important for our cells. And these are sticking out from our cells, and they have pockets in them with very specific shapes. And some of these viruses have developed shapes that will fit exactly into those pockets and match them, a bit like how a key fits into a lock. So in the case of COVID-19, it has these spikes whose shape exactly fits into a protein sticking out from our cells called ACE2. And so this happens, and our cells really just don't know anything about this happening at this stage. But what this has done is unlocked that lock that was keeping the virus out of the cell. And so now the viruses have a way to get into the cell. Our cells still don't know that anything is wrong. But what's actually happening is that ACE2 bound to the virus is able to move into the cell, and the virus is stowing away on board of the ACE2 and getting into the cell that way. Our cells still don't really know that anything has gone awry, but now we have the virus inside the cell. And this virus is like a Trojan horse, because what it does now is it lets out from the inside of the virus some genetic information which is very specific to the virus and has a code in it that will allow the virus to replicate. Our cells still don't know that there is anything awry at this point, but the genetic information is able to use the cell's normal machinery to replicate itself and also to start making new viruses. At this stage, our cells think, something is amiss here. And the more viruses get made, the more worried our cells get. And this keeps happening. And our cells get very, very worried indeed when many copies of this are made. And they start sending out SOS signals to our immune system. And that's what triggers our immune responses, the rise in temperature, the inflammation, the cough, and so on. And that's part of an emergency message system to stop the virus in other parts of the body. But the infected cell, it's probably too late for that infected cell because so many copies of the virus are replicating by this stage. And what happens is the cell eventually gets to the point where it can't survive anymore and it's essentially dead. And that allows the cell to rupture and for these viruses to escape outside into the blood or into the airways where they can be coughed out onto other people and so on. And this is where they can go on to infect other cells, and this is how the cycle of infection continues. So now, with that little bit of information, you know the basics about how the COVID-19 virus works, how it infects our cells, and how it's causing us damage. Hope that's helpful.